Okay, welcome to this demonstration of Sage ERP MAS Intelligence. We are going to be looking at how we can use the out-the-box report designer report to create our own customized financial statements. Be sure that this session does apply to any version of Sage Intelligence. So whether you're running ACPAC Intelligence, Sage Simply Accounting Intelligence, Peachtree Intelligence, it will apply to all of those products. The main reason for doing this demonstration is that a lot of end users and partners have had challenges in trying to do customized groupings for their financial statements along the lines of what FRX was able to do. And the purpose of this session is to illustrate to you from first principles how we take the out-the-box report designer report and customize it so that we can achieve effectively our desired results. What I did to drive this session is I took this posting off one of the MAS community forums, and I've left the link up at the top. And this is a simple example, but I think for the purpose of the demonstration, it's important just that we keep it simple so that we can just get through what we need to in the allocated time. So the user that posted this wanted to create an income statement with the following account groups, specifically revenue. So it was effectively ranges of main accounts grouped into their own descriptions as per the structure here. Now there are many ways of doing that through using the report designer and Sage Intelligence. You can do it manually once the layout out the box is delivered into Excel, but the purpose of today's session is to show you the preferred and probably the quickest and easiest way of achieving that. Alright, first thing we're going to do is go to our designer. Just before we get started, the assumption for the session is that you are familiar with intelligence. We're not going to be training anything in the report manager or in the report designer, so we're going to go through things fairly quickly. I think it's important to understand the concepts of what we're doing here more than anything else. I'm going to go to my report designer, and most of us know that automatically the reports that ship are usually locked. So I'm going to take a copy of that report and I'm going to paste it into my training examples folder. Okay, and I'm just going to call it Financial Report Designer Custom Grouping, and apply that. Okay, the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to add a column, and I'll explain later why we need to add a column. But very quickly we can go to the columns area, and I'm just going to say add, and I'm looking for my main account description with the code. So main account code and description. That's available in the data container, but it's not available in my report. So I'm just going to add that to my report. Okay. Secondly, I'm going to go and edit my report, and I'm going to go and change the default add-in that ships with this report. Now, by default, when we have to do the mappings for a MAS Intelligence report, we are typically mapping from the account groups in MAS into our intelligence reporting groups. The purpose of this is that we want to change that to be a mapping from the main account code and description, which is the column we just added to this report, into our reporting groups. It'll give us a lot more granularity and control over the layout to ultimately get back to what we are trying to achieve here in terms of our layout, which is what I've got on the screen here now. Okay, so I'm going to my run add-ins, and I'm going to go and select the second add-in, which is related to the mapping and add-ins. And at the moment you'll notice we are currently using the account group description for that mapping, and I just need to confirm what column I just added. Let's just go and take a copy of that. Let's go to the properties there. So I'm just going to copy that main account code description and go and add that, and we're going to replace that there. Okay, very simply. Now Potentially what we'll do after this video, we'll create a version and make it available for download afterwards, so you don't have to do that. But ultimately that's what we've done. So now we're going to go and run our report. And we're going to choose our fiscal year of 2010 because this is running off the demonstration data. And I'm going to go and select the original budget code. Okay, so while that's waiting, the standard layouts that ship with the Report Designer and Maz Intelligence make use of the mapping that takes place between the account group code or description and the reporting groups in Maz Intelligence. Quite often that's found to be a little bit at too much of a high level for users to be able to achieve their layouts desired, as well as the mapping that's coming through from the system using the account groups is at a too high a level. So ultimately what we've done now, we've changed the mapping to be an main account code description. And then what we're going to want to do also is make changes to what we're mapping into. We'll notice now when we get into the mapping screen, we'll get there in a moment. Okay, now typically before I made that change, the description here would have been account group description, and it would have had just your Maz account groups listed here. We've changed that to be main account code, so we've got a lot more granularity in here in terms of what we're wanting to map into. Now the big challenge that we've had from most users and partners out there is that, but now you're only giving us a fixed set of reporting groups that we can map into. What happens if I want to create my own reporting groups, if I want to customize that accordingly? Now there are ways of doing it outside of this method. Again, we're prescribing this as probably the easiest method because A, it doesn't require you to have a connector module, and B, it can be done fairly quickly through drag and drop mapping, which we'll show you in a moment. Again, let's just look at some of those reporting groups. And if we jump back to the layout that we're trying to achieve, there's groups here that we want to map into, like human resource costs and office overheads, which don't exist there. So how do we create our own groups here? So what I'm going to do, I'm going to select one of my groups, and I'm going to hold down Alt and press D. Okay, Alt D exposes some functionality that allows us to add our own reporting groups to this area here. So very quickly now I'm going to add, by clicking that plus sign over there, a new reporting group category, and I'm going to call the first one revenue. Okay, and I'm going to go through from that layout and create all the reporting groups that I need. I needed human resources, I need office overheads, I need operating expenses, we need technology, not typing very well. Okay, we also need depreciation and amortization. Okay, so this has the effect of what you would typically probably do previously in FRX, and then we're going to have another group. You would do this in your form or report creation, your designer, I guess you would call it. We're currently creating these as our reporting groups within the report designer mapping. So if we just scroll down to the side there, we'll notice those are all our groups available there. What we need to do now is start mapping our main account code and descriptions into our new groups. Okay, so for the purpose of this session, I'm just going to take all the balance sheet accounts and map them to something, an area that we're not using, because the purpose of this session is to focus on the income statements. Okay, so all the way up to returned earnings, and I'm just going to put that to non-financial. Let's just do that again. Okay, so we're just effectively putting those aside. Now we're going to cater for, and again, if I go back to my layout, I've got the ranges here of accounts or main accounts that need to be mapped to these groups. So bear with me here. We're going to go map into revenue, and I know that I want to map those two accounts into my revenue. From a human resources, we're going to go and map. And remember, this is done off the MAS demo data, and this example was from a client out there, a real live client. So there's not going to be any matching, but again, it's the concept here that we're trying to achieve. So into human resources, we're going to be mapping up to 520, and we're going to add that in. Office overheads is from that range to that range, and also that one and that one. So I'm trying to illustrate here the term of non-contiguous account ranges to be mapped into these new reporting groups that we've created. Okay, that's done. Operating expenses, we need that whole group, and I need to come down here, and for some reason we need to add that one as well. Fantastic. Technology, we're going to add this range here, and we're going to exclude those two. We're going to go to depreciation and just add that in there. We're going to go to amortization, and then we're going to add the rest to other. Okay guys, so I think you can very quickly see how easy that is to take that level of unmapped system categories and map them to your own reporting groups that you've created. Please bear in mind that what comes in here is driven off of that field, and if you remember rightly, just for reference purposes, that was driven when we made a change to the add-in which said use this column to drive that mapping. Alright, so hopefully that makes sense to you. So whatever column we choose to do the mapping from, we're going to have to map from that into our reporting groups. We're happy with our mapping, we're going to say okay. It tells us that we've successfully mapped, and we're going to move on. Okay, so ultimately the same set of data is delivered through into our raw data sheet on sheet 1. Okay, so we've still got effectively a trial balance here. This is all our information. I'm going to scroll across. The difference now is that this primary grouping has taken the shape of our customized or created reporting groups. Remember, we created report revenue. Remember, all the non-financial stuff, we mapped all the balance sheets into that area because we weren't effectively going to be using that for the purpose of this demonstration. So there we have human resources, office overheads, etc., etc. Fantastic, that's all there. Let's go back to our landing page. Now, for those of you that have seen demonstration or have done training on this, we come to our BI Tools tab, and very quickly we can generate all of these layouts. Unfortunately, those layouts are mapped to the reporting groups that we haven't mapped our accounts to. Okay, so the purpose of Sage MAS Intelligence forcing you to map to those groups is ultimately so that out of the box you can have any number of income statement, balance sheets, and trial balances delivered at the click of a button. It also allows us to toggle your revenue account so that you can have a revenue less costs to give you gross profits, and it also allows us to do calculations of net profits, etc. However, we're saying now we're wanting to take control of our own destiny. So the methodology I would prescribe is go to the launch section in your ribbon on the report designer, and when that launches, we're going to go and take a copy of one of the existing layouts that we have. So we go load a layout. Let's take a copy of, we can take a copy of any one. I'm just going to take a copy of actual versus prior, and I'm going to call it my custom income statement, and say next. Okay, so we're at the point now we want to design our report. We've excluded what was done previously, but there is still some basic building blocks that we can reuse from that report, like the columns. So we've kept the columns that were delivered in that previous actual versus prior report. So there's actual, prior, and variance. That we're happy with that. The grouping, though, is not what we want. So to clear all of this grouping down the left-hand side, we're going to say clear all, because the rows are what we've configured now. So how do we configure those rows to bring in what we ultimately wanted. And again, I'm just going to go back to this is our end result. This is what we're wanting to get to from a row configuration perspective. Just let me jump back into the report designer. Okay, so first of all, I need to go to my rows and have a look what's available there. Now you'll notice that all the rows, row buttons here in cap locks are the ones that are defaulted with the system, and you'll notice all these other ones are the ones that we created. Okay, fantastic. So we want to start building our reports off of these row groupings, which is ultimately our primary grouping. Okay, before we just drag revenue in there, I need to make sure that you're aware. You'll notice the switch signs against some of the account row groupings, and again, as mentioned earlier, that is imperative to do so that you toggle the sign on revenue and other income, and on the balance sheet, for example, your current liabilities and equity, so that you can have meaningful calculations. So to achieve that, we right click on revenue, say toggle switch sign, and it just puts a switch. So ultimately revenue that's reflected as a credit will be toggled. Okay, we're going to add a spacer, and now we're going to start clicking on how we're wanting to build our account. So revenue comes in first. We're then going to add a spacer. Then according to our layout, it was human resources. Now you can see how we're starting to build the report, guys. Human resources, office overheads, operating expenses, technology. Okay, I'm then going to add a spacer, because just now I'm going to want to put a total in there. I'm going to add another spacer, because then I want depreciation, I want amortization, add two spaces, because I need to put some calcs in there later, and then finally I'm going to put in sorry, what have I done? Operating income. Okay, then we're going to say other. Okay, so that's the layout that we got. However, we need to create a total now for these expense accounts. Again, going back to our layout, there's a total expenses calc here. How do we achieve that? So we'll come back into the report designer, and again, these pre-created calculations here aren't really going to help us. So we're going to do this ourselves. This is known as the formula builder area of the report designer. Again, if I've got rows selected here and I start creating a formula here, it's going to be a row-based formula. If I want to create a column-based formula, I'd need to select my columns, and I'd be creating a column-based formula. Okay, so we know we want a row-based formula, so I'm going to go back on the rows. Right-click in that area, say create new formula. And now, so my formula is going to be a combination of all those expenses. Okay, so we're going to scroll down, and I'm going to say it is human resources plus office overheads plus operating expenses plus technology. Save that, and we're going to call it total expenses as per the layout. Okay, for us to get that into our report now, we just click on that and it adds it in at the bottom of our layout. We're just going to need to drag that up, so let's just drag it up to where we want it, and I think we need to drag it a little bit higher. No, actually we're going to put it in down there just below this total spaces. Okay, so there we've got our calculation for total expenses. We then need to create another one, which is going to be called operating income. So again, we're just going to create a formula, and that operating income is effectively going to be our total expenses, our revenue less our total expenses, less depreciation and amortization. Okay, so how are we going to do that? Well, first of all, we know that it's our revenue less, and I'm going to toggle across to get to my areas where I've got my total expenses, and then I'm going to subtract from that, and I'm going to push this button here now to get onto the other side of my calculated items for my standard items, and I'm going to say then less depreciation and less amortization. Fantastic. Save that. What is it called? According to the layout that I've got, it's called operating income. Say OK. And how do we get that into the layout? Well, we need to click on that, and it's going to drop it in again at the very bottom of all our rows, and then we decide where we want to drag it into. So we're going to put it up just below amortization, and we're going to add a spacer there and drag that in just above there. Okay, so hopefully you've got an understanding of how we've achieved that. So we've built the layout accordingly, bearing in mind that these are based on the groupings that we catered for in the mapping section, and total expenses, operating income, and net income, which I haven't done, we've created as formulas, okay, in the report designer. Now what we can do is come and generate our layout. So we're going to select generate, and what it's going to do is going to generate a layout into Excel. The benefit of this now, if it's not quite what we want, we delete the Excel worksheet and we can go back and regenerate a further layout. So it doesn't mean that if we've got it wrong, then that's it. So it's very easy to go back and start tweaking with our layout accordingly. Okay, so let's have a quick look at what we've done. So there we have a nicely presented income statement. There we have our revenue section at the top, obviously with all the revenue accounts that we mapped into that revenue grouping at that level. We also have our human resources. What's interesting to note here is you'll notice I've got a bit of a confusing second level of grouping here. Now the purpose of that was that was based on the original layout. So let's use this as an example. I don't want that to be in there. I'm going to right click, I'm going to delete this worksheet. Because I created that my custom income statement, I can very quickly now, instead of going to the launch button, I can come to this quick edit and very quickly go and edit this layout. And what I'm going to do, I actually don't want to have the second level of row grouping, which was effectively part of the original layout that we ship with. So you'll see the second level of grouping here is account group description. I'm going to clear that out and regenerate the layout. And let that generate into Excel, and we should very quickly see how we've been able to change and create a layout according to our needs. So there's our revenue. We can go down into the lowest level of revenue accounts. We can go look at our office overheads. There's our total expenses, which effectively is a summation of our total expenses, which I missed out that portion there. Okay, now just before we finish, hopefully we've got a good understanding of effectively what we've achieved here. We've taken the standard report designer report. We've effectively added the main account code description, and the purpose of that was so that we could use that in our mapping element. To change that mapping element, we had to go back to our original report. We had to unlock it so that we could get access to the add-ins. And on the second add-in option, we changed this from main account code description to account group description to main account code description. Now just think about the possibilities there. You could maybe be using, you might want to map based on an optional field or a user-defined field or a tailored field. Okay, so you could use that very easily to map accordingly and pull that into your layout. Okay, we also then created our own reporting groups. So instead of using the ones that Sage Mass Intelligence ships with, we created our own groups such as office overheads, operating expenses, technology, etc. And those are what have been delivered down the left-hand side here. At this point now, we might still have some last-minute changes, and maybe we want to map some new accounts into other areas. Well, it would probably be best if any new accounts are added and they're not mapped, when you next run the report, it's going to pop up that mapping screen. So it's going to ask you to map them accordingly. Otherwise, what you can do is that you can take some accounts here that maybe don't belong and you can manually move them. So intelligence still allows you to do things in a manual way. So maybe we decide we want to report on those completely separately at the bottom there, and we cut those two reports down at the bottom, and there they are available down there. Any changes we want to make to the Excel portion, we need to do the create and link function, and ultimately that stores this information back to our original report. But hopefully, guys, that gives you a good understanding of how we've used the report designer building blocks of row components and formulas to effectively achieve what we call contiguous and non-contiguous grouping of your accounts within MAS and using MAS Intelligence. Okay, this video will be available for download from our BI community. It'll also be available and posted on various Sage forums. I trust it's been a good session. For any further questions, please ensure that you engage either on the BI community or through the Sage forums. We'd love to hear additional videos like this that can add value to you guys using Sage MAS Intelligence for your reporting needs.